Hello everyone. Welcome to Academy of Astrology Livestream podcast. I'm Ron Zhang, your host, and bear with me. Let me remind you, this is my third podcast today, so I may not knowing what I'm talking about, and but I think Marcus and Mandi will definitely hold me in the right place. Hello, Mandi. Hello, Marcus. How are you?
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. So, well, I think today, no wonder I feel like that overwhelmed because it's lunar eclipse. I
Yep.
think it's happening sometime. It's now or
It's
later. I don't know.
earlier. It's happened already, I
Earlier.
think. I think it's happened
Yes,
already
yes.
today. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was like, ooh, it was make people so busy. I mean, that was like, okay. So, I mean, today we were going to focus mainly we focus on the lunar eclipse, but also quite interesting because our king Charles III, right? Am I saying it right?
I think
Charles
so.
III.
Yeah.
So tomorrow is his a big day. He's going to marry again. No. He,
Not again.
it's
Just the coronation.
his
Coronation.
coronation,
Yeah.
his coronation, and that is quite interesting. You know, lot of, I have to admit, lot of foreigner people like me. I'm not. A lot of foreigner people because this is not part of their life. So when they hear about a king, coronation, prince, princess, they'll feel like, oh, it's a fairyland. So that's why a lot of people, like maybe all around the world, where maybe the country is a republic,
Mm.
you know that, and
Mm.
they are fancy have a king. I really say, take it, take it, free, buy one get one free. You can
Right.
take a prince, which one, the another one, take it away too, and include Pizza Express.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, but no, that this is all it. I've been just before we get into the specifics of the astro. I mean, I've
Yeah.
been thinking about this a lot since at the end of 2020 we had the great conjunction in Aquarius, Jupiter and Saturn, and
Hmm.
and one of the meanings I feel of that sort of great conjunction, it's sort of inaugurating a new year, as you guys know, of great conjunctions, which are these every 20 years Saturn and Jupiter conjoin. So for the next 120 140 years or so, they're all going to be in air signs, and this was the first one of a continuous run of those in air, so it sets the tone for the next. So Aquarius, because this was with Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius, and Saturn rules Aquarius in traditional astrology, and Aquarius has lots of great qualities. It's a very egalitarian sign, it's a very social sign, but it's really the sign of the people, and traditionally it was also the detriment of the sun. It opposes Leo. So whenever I hear news about royals and royal family and stuff like that, I'm like, it does feel like it might be the sort of like the beginning of the end of royalty, or that during this next 120 years, things will be difficult for them. I mean, that it's amazing that our constitutional royal family have held on for so long. And now, of course, Pluto's come into Aquarius, which is
Yep.
and it's also, I think, gonna square Charles's sun in Scorpio at some fairly near point.
We
So,
can have a quick look later. I think that would be very interesting. But before we focus, and also if we have time, but if we don't have time, we can leave that because next week. Oh yes, let me announce that first, and I will remind everyone later. So, next week, because I'm traveling to Taiwan, so next week's Friday evening, 8 o'clock will be my 4 a.m. in the morning.
okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I moved the mundane astrology discussion to the Saturday 4 p.m. Saturday 4 p.m. UK time. So please welcome to join us. Okay. So don't go on YouTube on Friday night. You will miss it. I will leave you a little message before, but just to remind you, it's on Saturday. So if you our followers, just remember next Saturday is our mundane astrology discussion group, and we will definitely focus on the election in Turkey too. But if we have time, we will share a little bit mind if we have time. Okay, so let's see the chart about this lunar eclipse. I use London. I think no, this is Taipei. I should use the London one here. Here we are. Okay, let me share screen. it's quite interesting. I have to repeat what I'm doing because I kind of don't know what I'm doing at this moment. Here we are. Here we are. So this is in London. So yes, it's just 2 hours ago, just when I was sitting there and I feel like I'm overwhelmed. I just finished the second recording. And this is the 5th of May, 6:34. And we have this interesting lunar eclipse. So who want to start? Mandi, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's a Scorpio lunar eclipse. And of course, remember, a lunar eclipse is I guess, a more intense full moon. It's a full moon. It's an intense full moon. Particularly, it's an intense full moon when the moon is in Scorpio. It's a very intense sign for the Scorpio. It's an uncomfortable sign for the moon as well, which is really interesting. And it's conjunct, we can see the sun on the other side. The sun is in Taurus. It's conjunct Uranus, and it's conjunct Mercury, which is still retrograde in Taurus. So we've got the idea of this very intense energy. And don't forget, on the 20th of April, we had the solar eclipse. Eclipses tend to come in, well, they come in pairs, basically. So we've had that period between eclipses, which is often an intense period between eclipses. It's always kind of that anticipation of something's going to happen or something's going to be lost, for example. And this eclipse here again with Uranus and with Mercury retrograde, all in Taurus. So there's an element of surprise, an element of to expect the unexpected, the idea of needing to regroup, rebound, recount. Even the idea of repulsive things we find repulsive is very much associated with Scorpio and with Uranus as well. So all of these things about expect the unexpected, surprise, even excitement even, is very much goes against the whole Taurus Scorpio axis, which is about control. It's about holding on. It's also a south node eclipse, so it's more than any other eclipse, it's about letting go and being able to let go. And attachments is very much to do with Scorpio and Taurus. So again, attachments, thinking about attachments. I mean, my kind of advice for this eclipse, the eclipse obviously was, I think, a couple of hours ago, an hour and a half ago or so. But, you know, that doesn't mean it's just like, oh, we're going to get a feeling on the moment. They have very long tails. Eclipses tend to have quite long tails. So particularly if it kind of hits your chart. So advice would really just be to sort of, just to kind of just, it sounds awful, but, well, not awful, but trite, just to sort of chill out, just to sort of chill out a little bit and just look at your own chart. And one of the things you can do quite easily is look to see which house the chart this eclipse falls in. I mean, for my example, for instance, these eclipses, both eclipses actually, the solar eclipse we've just had and the lunar eclipse now, fell in my sort of 12th house area and 6th house area. So that for me was a period when I really needed to retreat, to regroup. Obviously, we've got Mercury going retrograde during that period as well. I had a brief, thankfully, but rather painful illness. So that again, that kind of made me go inwards and made me retreat and made me rest, which is all very 12th housey stuff. I also, there was something material in my world that I let go of. I had to let go of. That was very interesting, but also it brought some freedom. So we're sort of talking about, this was just a couple of days ago, and the freedom that it brought is probably reflected in the Uranus there, needing to let go of something and the end of something, but that freedom that kind of came with it. I'm not going to say what it is because it's personal, but there was really been an interesting period. That's just, you know, my obviously very personal experience of it, but for generally speaking, kind of what I've said. And what's really interesting, I'm sure Marcus will be able to talk more to this than me with his traditional background, is that moon in Scorpio is in a mutual reception with Mars in Cancer. and they're also in a trine as well. So I don't know. Marcus is nodding his head, so I'll pass over.
That's great. Thank you, Mandy. You set me up perfectly there, because I wanted to go in on two things. One was just the technical astrological bit, and the other was a sort of little personal anecdote just from today, because it's this eclipse is very close to my ascendant. My ascendant's about 12-13 Scorpio, so it's pretty much across it. So I wanted to start with the mutual reception. So perfect. Thank you, Mandy. Yeah. So everything, what she said, basically what Mandy just said, all that, the full moon sort of vibes of things being fully out in the open, but then with some disruption because it's a lunar eclipse, with all the stuff about deep emotions being involved and maybe having to let go of things because it's a south node eclipse. The moon isn't right on the node, it's a wide eclipse. The moon is only going to be partially eclipsed, so but it's still powerful. And that reception with the Mars in Cancer, that Mars is also the ruler of the eclipse, the luminary being eclipsed here, it's the ruler of the moon, so that Mars in Cancer is very significant. And Mars has another helpful mutual reception or generosity with Jupiter in Aries, because Jupiter's in Aries, which is ruled by Mars, and Mars in Cancer is the exaltation of Jupiter. It's the sign where Jupiter is exalted. So what I take that to mean is that something about the outcome of this Scorpio full moon, where feelings might be stirred up, some quite troubled feelings, some quite turbulent feelings, and maybe those feelings would be around inadequacy in some way, or having not dealt with conflicts or difficult situations in a good way, or having had emotionally troubling situations arising with others. Why do I say all that? Because the moon in Scorpio tends to hold on to painful feelings, and it's about digesting and processing difficult feelings essentially. And Mars in Cancer has problems expressing itself directly, and often gives rise to difficult thorny emotional situations, should we say. But it can also be the remedy for those situations. Mars in Cancer can be like a psychic surgeon in a way. At its best, it can be good at identifying and acting on emotional hurt. So it can actually be, I heard in old textbooks, it's sometimes described as a good phlebotomist, phlebotomy being taking blood. So that can be really negative. It could be like the psychic vampire type who like just drains everybody's energy by being passive aggressive and negative. Or it can be the person who takes away somebody's painful, takes away down the swelling, or just, they can take blood without pain, sort of thing. So the way I think the most positive outcome of this eclipse might be experiencing those sorts of things, and then doing something to act on them, using one's judgment to act on them to ultimate benefit, to sort of digest some of those difficult feelings that may come to the surface. And I think, as Mandy cautioned there, do not act precipitately. If Mars in Cancer acts hastily, usually the action will be messy because it will come out all sideways. Mars is not good at targeting itself in Cancer. It will tend to act, if it acts too quickly, it will tend to be precipitate and overly emotional. Whereas if it allows itself just to mull on things for a while, just to allow the sort of tide to go in and out a couple of times, it'll often make a better move. And I think that the Jupiter in Aries, in that overcoming square to Mars there, is kind of urging quick action. But Jupiter, if it's used correctly, can help you take the right action. So here you might feel difficult feelings coming up, and perhaps these might be things that are related to stuff that's happened with other people in the past that you're thinking of again, because Mercury's retrograde, conjunct the sun, and a full moon. It's a very relational, full moons are very relational. And also I do see this as a sister to the eclipse we had this time last year in May, sort of 24 degrees Scorpio Taurus. So eclipses come in sequences, so these might be just like it's going to be developing themes from previous eclipses. That's the technical bit. The little very brief anecdote, because I'm hogging the mic a bit, just for today during the eclipse, I just felt quite emotional. I was triggered just by watching watching a little video on YouTube of somebody talking about, because I'm a herbalist as well, complementary therapist, and this person was talking about these irresponsible complementary therapists harming people. And it just made me think about, because this is one of my nightmares as a therapist, is to prescribe somebody something that causes a side effect, or to be in some way complicit in somebody making a bad decision for their health. So it really triggered me in quite profoundly, and it got me mulling over a lot of things. So that's the kind of thing that will happen on a full moon like this, just even full moon. The fact that it's an eclipse means there may be consequences of that. And I think the positive potential from this eclipse is you could end up making decisions which will get rid of or help to alleviate emotional difficulties in your life if you don't act too quickly or too hastily or too over emotionally to them. I think there's quite positive potential from this. But it's about letting go of it. And I'll say more, but not yet, because I've said too much. So
never too much, okay.
I'd like to add something, actually.
Please.
Just a note on the degree of the eclipse. So the sun is at 14 and 58, 15 degrees of Taurus. 15 degrees of Taurus is the exact midpoint between the equinox and the solstice. So we're at that midpoint, that mid-season point, which is really interesting. It's actually it actually marks the fire festival of Beltane, which is generally celebrated on 1st or 2nd of May, but it's actually the actual timing of it is when the sun is at 15 degrees. So what that kind of tells me, and it's in Taurus, of course, what that kind of tells me is that we know that eclipses can be about endings and letting things go. But obviously, when you end something and let something go, you make space for the new. And that attachment to that idea of spring and the sun, the return of the sun, the festival, fires are lit to celebrate the return of the sun, S-U-N. Interestingly, it also corresponds fairly close to Easter, which is about the return of the sun, S-O-N. You know, that kind of pagan Christian
wow
crossover, which is I always find very, very interesting. So that's it. So there is perhaps, and I think Marcus, you kind of spoke to this, thought about carefully. There is something to celebrate, actually, at the moment. There is, we might not, I mean, we're being asked, we're being invited to a kind of forced celebration in the UK at the moment, which we shall talk about shortly. But there is something to celebrate. Spring, renewal, new starts. And because it's Taurus, really, we're also invited to celebrate the natural beauty of the earth and of nature and the natural beauty within all of us. So I think that's another positive thing that we can do, which is quite interesting, that we've got, again, Mars in Cancer speaks to some of those things. Self-care, looking after yourself and being kind to yourself. I think when you talked about Mars in Cancer being passive aggressive, it can also be aggressive towards yourself emotionally, and beating yourself up a little bit. So be kind to yourself, look after yourself, go out in nature. It's going to rain all day tomorrow, I think, in the UK.
But that is a wonderful reminder, Mandy. I love that. And actually, I was sort of thinking about that. I can't believe I forgot it, but because Mars is squaring Chiron in this chart as well. So the fact that Mars rules the eclipse, that Mars is having real confidence issues in this chart, because it's in its fall. So planets in the fall generally tend to struggle with their confidence. It's actually coming close to its full degree, because Mars is at peak fall in Cancer, I think around 26 degrees. So it's not far off. And it's squared Chiron. So it's kind of like it's feeling all wounded and whatnot. So what I really love about that reception with the Jupiter and Aries, it's saying, pick yourself up, have a bit more confidence, use positive selfishness, be positively selfish. That's because there is such a thing as positive selfishness. It's like, no, you have a right to exist. You have a right to assert yourself. You have a right to protect and to defend yourself and to take defensive action. And you have a right to, if necessary, remove yourself from emotionally upsetting or situations that make you feel unsafe. You have a right to act to do that. And I think that could be a really positive result of this full moon. You have a right to do that. You don't have to be downtrodden and you don't have to take abuse. That is kind of one of the positive things that I think that might come out of this full moon.
There's something that I always say to myself often, out loud if I'm on my own, but in my own head, is I say this to myself a lot. And it does, I think, actually rewire your brain.
Yeah,
I think
habit, by
doing
habit,
it.
just by
I am
repetition.
safe, I am safe, I am safe, I am safe.
Okay.
Anytime I feel any kind of hurt coming up, or any kind of anxiety coming up,
Yes.
first of all, we talked about nature. First of all, I find by grounding myself, learning to properly ground yourself, and then just tell yourself, I am safe, I am safe.
I love that, Mandy, because that's like that Mercury retro next to the sun is like literally repeatedly speaking to oneself. And Taurus is all about comfort and safety. And there's something there about, because of course Mars in Cancer is all about emotional triggers and all about feeling unsafe. And the moon in Scorpio in its own way feels unsafe too. The moon in Scorpio just feels unsafe, and Mars in Cancer sort of acts on that feeling. So I think that's brilliant. I just want to throw in one last thing, which is the lunar mansion that I always like to look at on lunations anyway. This is a tropical lunar mansion, so it will differ a bit from the sidereal, obviously, but this is from Christopher Warnock's book on mansions of the moon. This mansion is, I think it was about poison or medicine. So he said it's poison, medicine, protection against inimical forces. So the theme is protection. Here the focus is on protection of health, and it's putting yourself in protective mode. Don't eat to excess, could be prone to an upset stomach, blah 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 blah. The point is here, where the moon is in these degrees of Scorpio could indicate potentially just needing to be a little bit more self-protective, which really fits in. But it's poison or medicine. You could accidentally be poisoned. I think here that the poison is through old emotional wounds or things coming up. But at the same time, if you act to protect yourself, and Mars in Cancer is quite good at defense, actually, it can be quite good self-defense placement. Then you can avoid some of that difficulty. So I love that, Mandy, about speaking to yourself.
Yeah.
Rod, what did you say?
So Marcus, what you said about like poison or whatever, like Mars in Cancer, you just made me think about cancer. Has something to do with the stomach, doesn't it? And when I said I was a bit poorly earlier this week,
stomach
I
issues.
I literally had incredibly awful stomach pains, and it did feel like there was some kind of poison going on, some kind of bug. It's fine now. I'm absolutely fine now.
Good.
I'm fine now. But that's quite literal.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because that might have just been coming up to this eclipse, Mandy.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, totally.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
I want to echo both of you side with the. I mean, you guys nearly talk about everything. I have to add something. It is very difficult, especially my brain is totally just like it's like a dry lemon, totally squeezed out during the daytime, with two different.
You're doing very well, Rod. I have to say, you're doing very well.
I want to contribute something. I want to contribute something, and to echo what you say. Because the first is when Mark is talking about these poison things, and I just realized, the fixed stars. There's a fixed star in this in the 15th degree of Scorpio, called the Zuben Escanubi. It's the scale. Is the Libra scale. So the difference between the sidereal zodiac and the tropical zodiac. Even this is the tropical zodiac is 14 degree, 58 Scorpio. But in the sidereal, or let's say in the sky, this degree is right on the star of Libra, the south scale, and it is this star is exactly on the ecliptic. I think so. I remember it's on ecliptic. I have a double check.
Yeah, it is. No, it is. So. I know it is, Rod.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, and the scale in the ancient time is the 2 claw, right? The 2 claw of Scorpio. So it has the meaning about threaten or crash or attack, the feeling about that. But also, I mean, according Dr. Benedict Brady's interpretation, Do you think both scale, the 2-star, one is the Esquimali and one is Eskenubi. Then Zuben Eskenubi, the south part of this scale, are more into they all kind of trying to fight and help each other, help people. But the southern one do this for like everyone's good. So it's like a kind of trying to do the social reform and trying to participate in the kind of important social event, but for everyone's good. And this is quite interesting in one way with this the lunar eclipse kind of I can say conjunct in this way. I'm very comfortable to say conjunct with this. Another one is the right opposite. It's just I couldn't say it's coincident or not, but the sun is 14 degrees 58, and at 14 degrees 30, there is another fixed star in the Andromeda constellation, and called AOAUK. Traditionally, this is the Venus nature's fixed stars. So it's a lovely, beautiful, gentle, nice, artistic. That's what Vivian Robertson says. But I think it's quite interesting because it's on the feet of princess. It's right on her feet. So it's her feet. Well, that is kind of in the image of the mythology, that's how she been chained, couldn't move. So it could be, some quality of restrict, or some quality of like you being hold. It's both sides of meaning, the crowd and something you've been limit your action or something. But I like something else. It's quite interesting. When I teach this part of sky in Asia, one of my students from Malaysia, one of my students from Japan, they say, Rod, when you say something called alamak, do you know what that means in our language? I said, I don't know. Alamak in the Malaysian language, it means amazing. Surprisingly, it's surprisingly amazing. And then I don't know why the Japanese students say, what? In the Japanese, exactly the same. And I say, well, I always trying to add this layer of meaning. Maybe for Malaysian people or for Japanese people, that is the alamak. That's amazing, surprising quality of this star. And then when it conjunct with the Uranus, and I say, I like this, triple meaning about it. But maybe other people say, maybe it's too far. But it's just a little bit different. So
it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
So should we go to look our new king?
Yeah, go on then.
Go on then. So what should I do? Should I, because Mandi say have a should we just look at first chart first, and then we go if Mandi prepare her chart?
Yeah, perfect. That sounds
it's quite interesting because today when I talk about this to my students in Taiwan and Hong Kong and China, and they say, do you have royal astrologer in England? Because why your king choose lunar eclipse day? I say, I think they love lunar eclipse and solar eclipse because himself was born before. If you look at the chart.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And it's sort of inverse of the one we have now. What's fascinating there, he has the moon with the north node in Taurus and the sun with the south node in Scorpio, and the one that's happening today is the flip of that. So that's very interesting.
And that was like, how could you say astrology is not amazing?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like patterns.
Just as an aside, his first son, William, who's the heir who's the next in line after King Charles III, he's a Cancer sun. He was actually born on the day of a solar eclipse.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Wow,
Mandy. Yeah. Fascinating. Family of eclipsy people, which is very interesting. Interesting.
It is, when you think that one of the things of eclipses is sort of letting go and endings, for example.
Yes, and the sun
the
and
whole
moon
the raison d'etre of the British royal family is to just keep it going.
Yeah,
just
and
to
the
keep
sun
it
and
going.
moon are the royalty of the sky.
Exactly.
So eclipses
Yeah.
traditionally were bad omens for royalty. So it's interesting. But I mean, so
Very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just like in terms of the sort of Pluto thing that I sort of mentioned earlier, I thought it was going to be squaring his sun, but it's not actually. His sun's late in Scorpio, but it will be squaring his ascendant in a few years, not too far away. And of course, it'll be squaring his
Should I put it
moon
down?
before that.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
this is not.
so it's squaring his moon right now.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
Pluto has been.
should I put
Yeah,
the
just transits
what's
on it, maybe
his
something.
chart and the lunar eclipse?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, that's fun.
Okay, let me find the right chart. No, this is Taipei one.
Chart for the actual start of the celebration as well. The coronation tomorrow is really fascinating.
Yeah, we'll
have a look at that as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely look at that for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, look, I mean, he's on his exact nodal return.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Exact.
Fated encounters.
Yeah. So
Go
on, Mandi. Sorry, no, go.
Interrupting again.
No, I'm
anyway,
interrupting you.
Let's interrupt each other. Come on, it's a conversation.
Yeah.
What I that's the first thing when I looked at this chart. I noticed it's his exact nodal return, which is absolutely fascinating. That happens every 18, 19 years, right? It's kind of very similar sort of transit period as kind of repeated eclipses. Actually interesting. And so yeah, he would have had on his last nodal return, it might have been close to an eclipse. We'd have to look that up. But what I thought was interesting is that is very is in a trine and a sextile to Saturn, those nodes. And they see that sorry,
Saturn
his nodes, the nodes
Yeah.
are in a trine and a sextile to Saturn. And of course that speaks to his duty, his responsibility, and the nobility of it as well, which is really interesting. And the fact that someone had to die for him to get the job that he's been waiting to take for 70 odd years.
I mean that too. Yeah, for sure, exactly.
The long apprenticeship of Saturn, you know.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
And he's at his Saturn half return. It's exactly opposite his natal Saturn. Exactly.
Oh my
God.
So that's usually when your sort of Saturn's like, you know, that's when you're age 14 and 45 and wherever Charlie is now. It's like it's kind of a culmination of, it's halfway through a Saturn cycle. So it's just as, you know, everyone talks about the Saturn return just because that's the first, when you're late 20s is your first sort of significant, oh my God, I'm fully adult, I should have my stuff together a lot more than I do. That's the usual vibe of a Saturn return, when suddenly you have to like feel like you're out of your 20s and you're entering your 30s and things need to come together. But people sort of tend to forget about the half returns, which are just as significant. Like when you're 14, you're entering puberty. When you're 45, mid 40s, it's like midlife crisis time. And this is a Saturn half return. It's a similar, it's kind of a heavy time. So yeah, Mandi, I spotted about the nodes as well. It's just like, it's for him, his natal Saturn is in similar relationship to the nodes. So I'm sure you're right. That must say something about this really long waiting period for fated events and him being quite good at perhaps playing that patience game. Well, he has to be really. But yeah, just, I don't know. Interesting.
Because he would have had his second. I wonder what happened on his second Saturn, because he's had 2 Saturn returns, hasn't he? So his second Saturn return would have been in his late 50s, and this is the first the opposition of that second cycle of Saturn, which is really interesting as well. I mean, I'm not a royalist. I don't really know much about the history. I wonder what happened then. Was it I don't know, I'm just guessing, but was it when he divorced Diana or when Diana passed away? It would have been something to do with that, because he was a lot older than her.
Yeah, it would have been around 14 years ago, wouldn't it? So if we count back.
So it was well after. Maybe it was when he married. Anyway, I'm guessing.
We'd have to look. But no, I think
but something would have happened, and now we've seen the culmination of what happened then. Who knows?
Yeah, no, but that's the way you do it for astrology. You'd see when the last one was and look at what happened then. And because this is his third, we could, it's third or fourth Saturn in Pisces, I'm not sure, but third probably. We could look at the other two. But shall we look at the actual coronation chart?
Yeah, should I let Mandi do it?
Yeah, I mean this chart was very
share.
significant, but because the MC of this chart, we noted that the eclipse chart was on his ascendant. So whatever's happening publicly now, very significant for him. So that's just, and as well as the nodes.
Yeah, I spotted that. And wait till you see where the MC of the event chart. The event chart is basically 11 o'clock tomorrow morning in the UK, which is, it's not the start of the procession and all the rest of it. It's when the actual coronation ceremony is due to start. So have a look at where the MC is there. The angles are exactly the same as his birth chart.
Wow.
Look at
wow,
that.
Mandi, that's amazing.
That's why I wanted to show you this.
They must have elected this.
That's what I thought. And the other thing I thought, we've got the moon in Scorpio, as we've already discussed. It's not very comfortable in Scorpio. It's a bit blah in Scorpio, right? The moon.
Yeah.
And that's the mood of the people in this type of chart.
Yeah.
So they stick it in the 5th house, which is the house of parties and celebration. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Is it going to be this fantastic celebration, which is obviously going to be, they're going to portray a fantastic celebration on the news media, but not that bothered.
Yeah, the moon's actually in a really gross position where it is. I mean, house-wise, great, 5th house, that's good.
Yeah.
But actually, the moon is in its fall. It's not happy in Scorpio, and it's between the rays of Mars and Saturn. It's literally void of course in this chart, which means it's making no further aspect in the sign. It's separating from a trine of Mars, and it's applying to a trine of Saturn. Now, there may have been, maybe this was elected. I don't know by which astrologer. I would say fire them. But if it was, then one might think, okay, if exactly as you say, Mandi, the moon is often the mood of the people. So here people are kind of like both apathetic and annoyed. Apathetic because the moon in fall in Scorpio, it's not really that enthusiastic. It's got too much stuff of its own to deal with, sort of thing. And then sort of annoyed because it's a Mars-ruled moon. But then it's not really doing anything because it's separating from that Mars, and then it's going to apply to a trine of Saturn. And Saturn does rule his 7th, which is other people. So maybe they are trying to work in some kind of like other people are sort of accepting in some way. I mean, it's not terrible, and it's really interesting, as you said, the angles lining up. And he does have that Jupiter in his 10th, which is going to help a lot if you're going to have a public a public event. It's like having Jupiter in the 10th. It'll make it bigger and shinier and more well received. And it does feel like they might be neutralizing the critics a little bit with that Mars in the 12th in reception with that Jupiter, with Jupiter overcoming. Do you know what I mean?
Really interesting. Also, the 7th house, particularly for everyone, but particularly for public figures, the 7th house has a lot to do with your public image as well. And that is, and we've seen from a lot of the stories of the royal family has very much lost its mystique. We know too much about them, and I think that has paid to their detriment. So the 7th house is really important as public image, and his house and his natal chart of public image is a Saturn ruled house, 7th house in his birth chart, which is interesting, which is good for a king, but it's not good for popularity particularly.
No, but I mean, I think that's okay. It is a choice though, if you were to choose this chart, to have the ruler of the 10th house, which is one's public image, one's authority, one's literal crown, as the malefic out of sect in its fall in the 12th house. I think that's a choice. That's like literally putting your career, your public image in the house of secret enemies, struggling and badly behaved. So that's like, did you hear some of the football chants? One of my friends sent me, who is not a monarchist, by the way. I'm kind of an abstainer. I'm like, meh. So like one of my friends who's really anti-monarchist sent me one of the football chants. I'm not going to repeat it here because we want this to remain uncensored and YouTube friendly, but it was it was all the football fans chanting, Scottish football fans, by the way, shouting. They were chanting something like that: "Shove your coronation up your," but repeatedly. And I just thought, well, isn't that Moon in Scorpio, Mars in Cancer trine just like? Yeah, that seemed a bit like that. But I do think Jupiter, that there's some positives here, like as you said, Mandy, putting the moon and the sun in lucky houses is kind of a clever thing, and having that Jupiter in the midheaven or in the 10th sign, that's really helpful, because and I think also Jupiter in the 10th is going to neutralize and lift up also, so it'll turn a lot of that negativity from secret enemies and people attacking the monarchy around into more of a positive. So it may be that they do have some really clever astrologer working for them who's just going, this is the best we can do, let's make it.
Yeah, we've got to put it somewhere. We've got to put Moon and Mars somewhere.
I have to say, if you look at okay, so we talk about Mars. I mean, we can always choose something else. Let us say that we can always choose another planet to represent, to represent the king. But if you going to look at Mars, well, he has no other time, and how long he can wait? That's a question. How long he can wait? How long he can last? So, but the first part of this year, Mars is retrograde and in Gemini, and then they go to Cancer, and then they go to Leo, and then they go into until the next one
has to be somewhere. Has to be somewhere. Yeah, exactly. So no, yeah, that's a very good point. The thing about elections, Rod, I'm sort of being facetious saying, sack the astrology, because actually sometimes it is a choice of finding the least worst time. And if you and if you were going to elect something, you'd probably want to put Jupiter in his 10th.
Yeah.
So
I think.
Yeah, while Mars is in Cancer, because it has the power of neutralizing Mars. And if Mars was in Leo, then it's going to be much more of a present irritation or threat to him. Whereas in Cancer, it's at least kind of weak and it's being neutralized by the Jupiter. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, it could be.
We'll never know. Sorry, Rod, go on. I was going to say, we'll never know whether they use an astrologer, but historically, we know that royals did use, almost exclusively astrologers were used by royals. And if you did a chart like this and said, this is the best I can do, the royal would go, well, that's not, we don't care what's happening in the heavens. If you can't do any better than that for me, they would be like, sack the astrologer. Probably, in the bloody history of the royal family. I just wanted to say as well that I also looked at the chart, the 1066 chart of England. When I'm looking at politics, British politics, I look at the 1801 Act of Union chart. But when I'm looking at the royal family, I look at the 1066 chart, which was the Norman invasion, 25th of December, 1066, 12 p.m, Hastings, because that is the start of the literally bloody history of the British royal family. Coming down through the 80s as it is now. So that's really interesting. When I look briefly at that chart, that I could have spent hours. It was quite fascinating, but a couple of things that sort of stood out for me is that transiting Saturn in this chart here, we see 5 of Pisces is conjunct Pluto in the 1066 chart. It's not nice energy. It's hard work, it's heavy work, it's losses, it's also a milestone, it's huge change. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, so they say. Maybe it had something to do with the loss of his mother and the fact that things have kind of potentially things are breaking down a little bit for the royal family now. The mystique of the royal family it seems to have been crumbling a little bit after her death.
Yeah, that's interesting, Manny. What was it? Was the 1066 Magna Carta and all that? Was that later? Because 1066, that was the Bayeux Tapestry, Battle of Hastings,
the Norman invasion,
wasn't it?
Battle of Hastings. Battle of Hastings.
Harold got an arrow in his eye or whatever.
Exactly.
That's the one where
There's a good Philomena Kunk video of that, which I highly recommend if some of you haven't watched the old
really?
Philomena Kunk spoof videos. Yeah, where she says, and here on this tapestry, you can see Harold cleverly catching the arrow in his eye. But despite that, shortly afterwards, he died. Nobody knows why. It's
Nobody
just like,
knows why.
Anyway, whatever. The point is, I'm bad parody, but you've got to watch. I love Philomena Kunk.
Oh,
Anyway,
Philomena Kunk's brilliant. BBC iPlayer.
yeah, absolutely
Yeah.
brilliant. Yeah, I was thinking, what does that really signify? Was it just the signification of the beginning of the royal line? Because Saturn Pluto, or this Saturn on the Pluto there, might mean just sort of digging, like, I don't know, like he's trying to establish new rules or a sort of new structure to his monarchy, and something about what was seeded then in the meaning of monarchy in the UK is going to keep undermining any attempt that he has to create a structure that he wants to impose, or that is trying to be imposed now. He's talked about restructuring the monarchy, or having the what it was slimmed down monarchy, or blah 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 blah. And I think what that implies is maybe something about the historical institution of the monarchy is going to keep throwing spanners in the works for him, like every time, because, you know, the vibe of Saturn Pluto conjunction, if you've ever had that in synastry, if your Saturn in your chart is conjunct someone else's Pluto exactly, it's really uncomfortable synastry, because even if you get on with that person, it's almost like the dynamic is like you're trying to do rules and try and control things a bit, and they kind of keep undermining you in ways that are really difficult to handle. So yeah, be interesting to see what happens.
Interesting. The other thing I noticed on this chart as well, the 1066 chart, is that current transit in Pluto, here we see at 0 Aquarius retrograde at the moment in 2023, is conjunct the Venus in the 1060 chart. The Venus is at 29 degrees 51 of Capricorn, so it will be going back to that as well, which perhaps says something. I can't remember off the top of my head which houses these fall in. It falls into the 1066 chart, but it says something perhaps about relationships because it's Venus, but perhaps also something about money, assets and resources, and there's tax as well because it's Pluto. So there's a lot more talk about where the royal family get their money from, where the royal family sort of, you know, the inherited money from the wealth. For example, I saw a documentary recently which said that Elizabeth I invested in the transatlantic slave trade and made so much money out of it and wealth out of it that she was able to pay off the national debt and also enrich the monarchy.
Was there a slave trade then in Elizabethan times? Then was that? I can't remember. History is not great.
It was when the Spanish were sort of going off and taking most of South America. Taking South America,
and that was
and the British were getting left behind, and they invested in the royal family at the time invested in the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade. It was a British thing. We think of it as an American problem but it was like the transatlantic trade was the triangle, you know.
And the British were heavily into piracy at the time.
And piracy.
It was well, they weren't. Britain was just the beginning, the seeds of Britain becoming a colonial power, I think.
Exactly.
They were mainly just pirates annoying everyone else at the time, I think.
But then it came. Then it
grew from there.
It was just pirates, but because of the piracy, that was when the state got involved. The royal state. We were an absolute monarchy. Then got involved and took control of this and made so much money for. They paid off the national debt and also enriched themselves as well. That was when it became formalized, which is really interesting. We're going off topic a little bit. I think it's really interesting because it was that was a part of history that I was never taught in school.
It's not off topic at all, actually, Mandi.
It's true history.
It is, and I think Pluto in Aquarius, as you guys talked about, we talked about a lot, is going to be about a lot of this coming to the collective, a lot of buried stuff, and it's opposing. It's in the detriment of the sun. It's against at its best. It's Aquarius is against toxic individualism or narcissism or individual authoritarian control.
Exactly.
And you know, at its worst, it can be about sort of like just, you know, the toxic side of equality is how do you make people equal? There's two ways of doing it. You can raise up the people low down. You can chop the heads off the people. You know what I mean? You can. It can be. You've got to be careful with any of these energies. Can go one or two ways, right? So the Pluto in Aquarius vibe, it's definitely going to be affecting Charles directly because he is literally a king, but it's also personally because the Pluto is going to be opposing his ascendant. So to that, Mandi, like the value of the monarchy being questioned, because the 1066 you said it's 1066 Venus is right next to where Pluto is now.
Venus is where Pluto is now.
Venus in the 1066 is where Pluto is now. So Pluto's transiting the 1066 Venus.
And that Venus at 29 degrees as well, 2951 degrees of Capricorn is really interesting. So we've had a pass or so of Pluto already, which is really interesting. And there's a lot of kind of called into question about sort of the finances. Really.
And I wonder if, because obviously Venus is archetypally female, it's and I wonder if that's Megxit. The whole and all the furore surrounding, do you know what I mean? All the furore surrounding Meghan Markle's leaving of the monarchy and all of that. So
and the death of the Queen as well.
Yeah. So very interesting.
Yeah. Wow. I think it's about the time we end in today's discussion because it's nearly we can never stop. I know, and we sometimes like I don't know. Does Marcus still have setting your computer kernel by 9 o'clock?
Oh yeah, I do. But thank you for reminding me. I can unplug it and then it won't do it.
Because suddenly 9 o'clock you would disappear, and when they go, oh Mandi, well thanks Mandi and Marcus today to join us, and we were supposed to. I think we said we want to look a little bit about Turkish chart. But I think a little bit time. But Mandi, do you have any idea? Because I think you have a quick look. Do you want to share something about this the Turkish chart? Your observation, or you want to finish here?
About the what? Sorry.
Turkey.
Any more to share about this chart?
No, Turkey. The Turkish chart.
The Turkey chart. We can do. I did have a brief look at it ahead of time. If you want to,
I don't know, Marcus.
Stay on a bit longer.
Yeah,
or we
I'm
can
happy to. I'm happy to. Yeah. I'm
happy to. Okay, should we? Okay, I'll take over. I will take the Mandi. Could you stop sharing? So yeah. So I will show you this chart. The first is like the things we know is very important. I mean, we will have the another discussion next Saturday, as I say, and but here because I think Mandi probably already prepared for it. So just let the Mandi share her view, and Marcus just what do you think about it? And I think this is Turkey. Wow, they have their Chiron return.
Okay. What's going on there, Rod?
Okay, what's going on? Okay, next Sunday would be the presidential election and the general election all together for Turkey. And this time, the opposition has like a kind of was beginning with the opposition has a very, very good power or something. Well, until recently, like I think that both sides reached the point they kind of 50-50 now. And the Turkey president Erdogan in his position for 20 years.
Wow.
And they really think this could be the time he go. But for the last couple of months, yes, because all the pool was in favor in opposition until like yesterday, or until like early May, 1st May, things change. The opposition coming down and he's coming up. He was like very ill or something. I don't know. Anyway, so I did ask some friends from Turkey. They say, yeah, we really this is really important for us. I say, so as for us, it's very important. Yeah, Mandi, if you have a quick look, have you noticed anything interesting or you want to share with us?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is Mercury in Taurus is stationed. It's about to go direct again. whatever that means. The other thing is that if we look at that Mars in Cancer that we've talked about a lot already here into on the second house cusp of Turkey, and obviously we know the second house in mundane astrology is about the nation's resources and income and coffers and all that kind of thing. It's in a trine to Neptune in the seventh house there. You can see that there's Neptune in Pisces. It's in a trine, which is quite interesting. I mean, what does that mean? When you see a Mars Neptune, it can mean a few things. It can mean kind of untrustworthy male figures or authority figures. It can mean all these things we've talked about passive aggressiveness, about gaslighting that we've talked about, particularly with Neptune. It can also be taken in by the narcissistic energies. I don't know anything really about Erdogan, and I know very little about Turkish politics, so I'm just making astrological comments here, not comments on any particular person in particular, but that kind of being taken in by the charismatic narcissist, and things aren't quite what they seem in government there with Neptune there. And Neptune would have been in the 10th house for quite a while, and of course you've got the mood of the people, the moon also in Pisces, exactly conjunct the MC on the election day. So the people are going to come out, to vote, I would say. Whether they will be disappointed by the results, well, we'll have to see. Whether there'll be a second round if they don't get enough to win at first, however it works. I believe if they don't get enough vote, if he doesn't get enough vote, or no one gets enough vote, then there will be a second round of voting, which is quite interesting. We shall see. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to call that. We've got there a Chiron return as well, you can see in the chart. I mean, Rod, you're more of an expert on Chiron than I am. What would you say about a Chiron return for a nation?
For a nation, Chiron return will reveal the condition when this country, I mean, because the Chiron in the national chart usually shows those vulnerable group and disadvantaged group, and in the 10th and 11th house usually is showing the government, and or the alliance of the government are usually kind of in a weak position or something. And also they could be also focused on the people who in need and something like that. When the Chiron return, but in the Aries, usually it's pretty interesting. That could be, people stand up against, take the action against what they are not happy with. That's why at this moment we can feel that lot of a strike, lot of action in that protection. So what I'm worried about is, yes, they have Chiron return and Chiron in 18 degree. That's on the election day. What really I wonder, that I shouldn't say worry me. I'm curious, like Mandi pointed out, that with this Mars Neptune trine, there's ambiguous. There's some things that are not clear. That we know this is the first round, and if no one going to take majority, then they will have a second round, second vote. I think it's something like end of May 28 or something, and that would be because by that time Pluto still retrograde in 0 degree Aquarius. But by that time, Jupiter moved to 0 Taurus. Mars moved to 0 Leo. Have you noticed a fixed T-square is forming by that time?
Oh, it's interesting.
And that would be, I think, an opposite Turkish sun. And that could be a deadlock, or things become kind of a intensified situation.
Yeah, that's a really interesting read, Rod. I mean, I'd need to sit with this and work through the chart for an hour or so to make any sort of, to even venture a prediction. But there are some interesting things that I would pick up on what you guys, but the ascendant of the of the transit chart. Is that what why have you just gone for a midday?
I use
Is the
midday.
ascendant
Only
significant?
use
So
midday.
it's so the ascendant doesn't matter. It's just midday. It's a random time. Okay, so forget that. But what's interesting is no, it's important. What's interesting is we've got the it looks to me from this chart that there's a bit of a mixed message. You've got the Venus on the ascendant of Turkey, which is lovely because that's nice for the people and everything. It doesn't rule any particularly difficult houses. It's partly rules the 11th house, which is fortunate, and the 5th house is fortunate. Yay, so nice. But then Saturn's overcoming and squaring the ascendant, so that's and Venus. So so that's a bit more difficult.
That's a trine.
Oh, it's a trine. Oh, I beg pardon.
It's,
yes, it's a trine. Sorry, it's like the houses being wonky is throwing me out.
Sorry for that.
No. My brain's obviously ceasing to work. But then the moon. What I really noticed was that moon's in the 10th in Pisces. So you've got the ruler of the 1st in the 10th in Pisces in a mutual reception with that Venus. That usually suggests to me that the president may not be going anywhere, because it's usually quite fortunate for whoever's in power, the people in the 10th, but the ruler of the 10th house, which is the boss or the president of a country, is Jupiter in the transit, is in the last degree of Aries. So there's a little bit of a mixed message thing there. Mercury, which is, so you can take the ruler as being the midheaven, the president, and his opposition as being the 4th house, Mercury. What's Mercury doing? Mercury is stationing direct on the North Node. So that's like stationing direct is like somebody who has been ill and is starting to get better or is starting to move forward again. So it's a bit of a weird one. It's kind of like, okay, so the people, it feels like this is good for the people are celebrating, but it's also kind of good for the people in power. It benefits the people in power, but then it looks like whoever is in power is just in the last degree of their sign, and the opponent may be slightly weaker, but they're just turning around and they're starting to get stronger, and they have a lot of support because of that North Node thing. So it's quite ambivalent and interesting. And just speaking finally to the Mars in the 2nd, that usually indicates some kind of expense or financial problems, I would say, because Mars in the 2nd house, it's like we're overspending, we have no money. That's what that says, something like that. Yeah.
I think Turkey's economic situation during the Erdogan's ruling is not pretty, to be honest.
Okay.
Several times the Turkish lira has to devalue terribly. They have a lot of problem with the exchange rate. So this showing if the unsettled happen, or this is just first round, that could be, because it's very likely if no one going to win the majority, then they will have a second round, and then this mark here that shows that will have a problem. Wow.
But
thank you.
We'll see.
Thank you, Marcus and Mandi. We just like a quick look, because I did say we prepare for it, but I was just thinking, well, if we prepare it, didn't talk about it, it's a big shame. And but let me remind our audience on the next Saturday. Let me check what date it is. Next Saturday is the 13th of May, 13th of May, 4 p.m. UK time. So me and our usual team of the Mountain Astrology Discussion Group will be here to discuss the month transit, and also we will talk about, we may focus on this Turkish general election, and then because it's next day, so that would be more fun to talk about it. But today, thank you, Mandi, and thank you, Marcus, to stay with us here, and then we will see you next week and the next month. Then bye.
Have fun, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.